Hello, I'm Mantastic and Fantastic, and today I'm going to be presenting my team building guide and review for the new Krishna evolution. So, a little bit of a background. In Puzzle & Dragons, the current meta is essentially a Heart Cross team. These teams are able to deal lethal amounts of damage by using actives, as well as being able to survive pretty much any attack due to their high damage mitigation. However, Gung-Ho is hopefully trying to push out new cards that can compete with this meta, such as Krishna, because Krishna is actually a tank leader that actually is relevant. By comparison, teams like Lucifer and Pandora, they are good still, but they just don't do enough damage and they're not quite tanky enough. By comparison, Krishna is infinitely stronger. It provides 2.25 times health and recovery, as well as 45 times attack. So he pretty much blows Lucifer out of the water, like, it's not even a fair comparison. So hopefully this is a direction Gung-Ho takes, because a lot of players do enjoy this type of playstyle, and the fact that you have to make multiple fire combos is exciting. So, Krishna is actually an endgame leader. You are able to clear content such as Arena 3 and other hard challenges like the one-shot challenge, so on and so forth. So it is well worth your time and investment to make your Krishna team up and running. So, at a glance, Krishna is an evolution from ultimate evolution from an ultimate evolution, so it means it gains 3 typings, augmented stats, and awakenings. So it keeps the same active, so you don't have to reskill him up if you already had him max skilled, as well as changing the leader skill. So right away, what stands out about Krishna is they have 5 enhanced Fire Orb awakenings. So dual leaders have 10. So you already have every orb enhanced, dealing lots of passive damage, and that has beautiful synergy with his Skyfall active, because his active actually gives you 15% fire Skyfalls for 3 turns, along with generating 2 random fire orbs from your board. So basically you can generate 2 orbs at random and have 3 turns of Skyfalls on a 6-turn cooldown. Max skilled leaders will actually allow you to have a permanent Skyfall buff up and running. And Krishna's leader skill now provides 2.25 times health, 45.56 attack, and 2.25 times recovery for fire cards. No restrictions. You don't have to have a specific type, you don't have to be anything else. Like, you just have to be a fire card and you get all these benefits. So this is amazing because cards like Xiang Mei were so horribly restrictive, and Krishna is a lot more flexible by comparison. Whoops, it should not say Raw Dragon. I don't know why it says that, but it's Krishna's scaling leader skill, and Krishna basically gains damage based on the number of fire combos formed. So from 0 to 1 combos, he only has 2.25 times. Nothing spectacular. At 2 combos, it's 20.25 times. Much more amazing. And if 3+ combos, you get 45.56 times damage. That is amazing because you can actually stack row enhances, and row enhances on 45 times is huge. Furthermore, you can basically get 3 rows because you technically make 3 combos with ideal optimal boards. And I'll show you a bit of gameplay in a moment. But this is an Arena 3 solo clear in Japan. I'll be posting some of my own arena clears in the near future, so look forward to that. I just need to get my team up and running and enough stamina, because it costs stamina pretty much. So, what are the pros and cons of Krishna? So basically, Krishna provides this whole new spin on monocolor teams because A, you are a tanky team that can survive hits, and B, you are able to control your damage by the number of fire combos you actually make. So if you need to control your damage, you can make 2 combos instead of 3. And vice versa, if you want more damage, form 3 unique combos. So essentially with 9 fire orbs, you can do a lot of damage. With 12, you get the row, and that's probably going to kill most things. So like I mentioned before, the pros are definitely its leader skill. You have a team that's durable and hard hitting. You can easily break 60,000 health in solo mode, and you can pretty much stall through almost any attack really, because with the recovery badge, which I recommend later on, you might have 10,000 recovery in solo mode. So that's huge. You have, and then another thing that's important is that these defensive benefits are unconditional. So basically, you don't have to worry about making a heart cross every single turn. Cards like Ranave and Gremory have to make that heart cross to get the benefit, and if they don't, they're fragile. Krishna is unconditional unless bound. The team building is flexible, they can stack rows like I mentioned already, and they have the permanent Skyfall buff. And you don't need to really run a shielding sub, like you really don't need to, unless you're doing a really niche specific dungeon. And it's probably the strongest non-Godfest exclusive, non-Monster Point card leader out there. So that's saying something because it's more accessible, because it should be quote-unquote easier to acquire compared to a 6-star Godfest exclusive. And I'm going to elaborate all these pros. So basically Krishna is able to be favorably compared to like Super Ultimate Raw Dragon, who was announced in Japan, as well as the Heartcross leaders, because his defensive benefits are completely passive. They are always there, so that is a big deal. And that means you're able to basically tank out hits, stall, or run any type of card you want. He makes Lucifer and Pandora seem like a joke by comparison, and hopefully that's the kind of the progression where Lucifer and Pandora will go with their reincarnated evolutions. So I have my own Krishna team, and I actually cap out at above 60,000 health in solo mode. Everything is 297, but that's a lot of health, and I have over 10,000 recovery, so I'm very safe. Like, if I were to quickly transition over to here, why is this not, one sec, let me transition better. Why is this not happening? I know why, what the problem is. Okay. Nope. Oh my goodness, one sec. I'm trying to show my screen. There we go, maybe. Oh my goodness. Why is it doing this? One sec. I tested this and it did work, but there we go. So there's my screen, because Mantastic has the Krishna. Mantastic actually just rolled one, but it's not evolved because I'm missing a couple things. So in solo mode, I'm able to hit 10,200 base recovery. So with 5 combos, I double that to 20,000. It's very easy to stall, so it's pretty amazing. And I was trying to showcase the burst damage potential. So obviously if I stack rows, which I have, as well as actives, I have this board here. There's no enhance. If I had Erd Sonata, this will do even more. But I have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11. So I have 9 light orbs. So I can actually make 3 rows from this board here, which is what I'm going to do. So from this board here, I made 3 rows. There's no Skyfalls, but I just want to show you the raw damage potential from 3 rows. So 3 rows with 1 extra Skyfall. I'm going to deal almost 10 million per card. So 60 million total. That's a lot of damage. If I had an Erd Sonata board, I would do probably maybe 50% more because everything's enhanced. So the point being is, like, there's so much damage burst potential with Krishna. You don't need to run a damage enhanced active, so that definitely cuts down on your need to oh shoot, where did everything go? That definitely cuts down your need for running a damage enhanced sub. There we go, now we're back. Don't know why my transition is so sloppy. But the point being is you have so much burst damage potential. You don't have to run damage enhanced subs, you're tanky, you're durable. You can tackle content and not have to worry about like your survivability, because like say Divine Queen Hera appears, you can survive that preemptive and you don't even blink an eye. You're still at like 2/3 health, like 20,000 health remaining. So, well, sorry, you're at 1/3 health, so pretty durable still. And like I said, like teams like Ronave and Gremory, they don't actually have this defensive benefits all the time. They are more vulnerable to damage because statistically, it's actually quite hard to get 5 hard orbs every single turn. In theory, you have to clear all 30 orbs for 5 brand new ones to fall down. So they have the same defensive multipliers, but they don't have the passive durability like Krishna does. So this is why Krishna can be favorably compared. Granted, Ronave and Gremory actually have higher potential damage output just because their multiplier is higher, most notably Gremory, and they can survive gravity-based attacks better, but this is a very good comparison. Furthermore, Krishna's not a Godfest exclusive, and the team I ran there has no Godfest exclusives, so it's kind of easier to acquire. So, one nice thing about the Krishna is that like it's unconditional fire multiplier, so I could stack rows, I could stack just combos, and you can overcome combo shields with ease. You can make obviously the rows for more burst damage. So Krishna is very well rounded. It's very safe to play, and the team building, as I'm going to describe later on, is very flexible. And you have options for damage control. If you make a row, you obviously do more damage. If you clump all your fire orbs into one big blob, you control the amount of fire combos you make, provided you have your Skyfall buff rolling. So, what are the cons of Krishna? Because every card has to have some drawbacks. So, he is vulnerable to binds in the sense that if you are bound, you lose your defensive multiplier. and that's a danger because you become very fragile at that point. That team you saw there would drop down to maybe 27,000 health. A lot riskier at that point. Gravity-based attacks still do their full damage to you. Heart cross and damage mitigation helps prevent that, but if it was 100% gravity and you don't have any latents, you do actually die. Fire damage does half damage to water bosses. We don't really have a crazy endgame water descend yet, but we may in the future, so it's just something to keep in mind that Krishna might struggle a bit more. You might have to bring a damage enhance for that. And the co-op bonuses offered only help the health, it doesn't help the recovery, so it's like the Heart Cross is gained a bit more out of co-op than Krishna does. So the main issue is the binds with Krishna, and that's something that is becoming more and more important because right now a lot of descends or hard-end content assumes your leaders are bind immune, and running a bind clearing sub does cost you a sub slot because A, they may not have necessarily beneficial awakenings, their active is non-offensive, and it's just like a dead slot in most cases. However, I want to describe to you hard and soft bind clearers. So, a hard bind clearer is someone who's bind immune and has a bind clearing active. So, Ame no Uzume is a perfect example of a hard bind clear, or Red Riding Hood. Both of them provide bind clearing binds and they're bind immune, so it's a very safe option. A soft bind clear, on the other hand, is a card that has the recovery bind awakening. So this allows you to clear a row of, clear a horizontal line of hard orbs, and you will clear 3 turns of binds. That card may or may not be bind immune, so for instance, Raziel is a bind immune soft bind clear, so she's kind of maybe like a medium firm bind clearer, whereas Yamato is a true soft bind clearer because he actually is vulnerable to binds. Granted, he is fire, so he's less likely to get bound, but it's something to keep in mind. Now, if you are playing solo mode, you might have to go for at least a medium firm to a hard bind clearer, but if you were playing co-op, you can definitely get away with a soft bind clear. And this is because your team only gets bound and your partner is still safe. So that means their soft bind clear is able to form that row of hearts and get you out of the bind, essentially. So what I want to showcase here with this image is how you actually trigger your leader skill of damage multiplier while clearing binds. So let's assume my team was fully bound, or my leaders were both bound. Normally, if I had matched my 3 fire combos with the bind clear, nothing would happen. I would just regain my health and recovery multiplier, but no attack would trigger. However, from this image here, you can see that I make a 1 fire match, 2 fire match, 3 fire match. That technically does not trigger the leader skill with the bind recovery. However, when this fire combo on the side cascades down, I would actually trigger my full multiplier because a cascade is kind of like a delayed match essentially, and the game registers it as occurring later on. It could, and that means when that match is triggered, Krishna's leader skill is like, oh, I'm unbound. I made a fire match. Oh look, I actually made 3 fire matches beforehand, and you'll actually trigger your full leader skill, even though you were bound previously. So if you are able to set up your board in such a way that you cascade your at least 1 fire combo, or you skyfall a fire combo, you actually can trigger your damaging component from your leader skill, along with actually restoring the binds and restoring your health recovery multiplier. Granted, this can be hard to do, but if you have a card like, say, Yamato, you could potentially get enough fire orbs, and especially enough hard orbs as well, and this can occur. So it's something to keep in mind. If you know that it's only, say, your leaders being bound, you can use soft bind clearers like Yamato to still provide value and utility after the fact that they cleared the bind, as well as being able to trigger your full leader skill with this type of cascading match. Just keep this in mind. Take a look at this image if you are a bit confused, but in essence, when you cascade or skyfall a fire match, it registers as all the fire matches having occurred, and you get the full 45 times multiplier. So, team building Krishna. Now, this is perhaps what a lot of people actually want to learn about because Krishna is so flexible. Like, anything potentially can work for Krishna. But of course, there are going to be stronger cards than others. And yes, Krishna has the same offensive leader skill component as Sarasvati in the sense that you have to match 3 unique fire combos, but this does not mean you have to build him or even play him the same way as you would Sarasvati. Sarasvati is 100 times glass cannon leader. She excels in dungeons where she doesn't have mechanics to deal with, and she can just simply blow things up. On the other hand, Krishna is tanky. He deals about half the damage of Sarasvati, but he is tanky. And because he is tanky, you can stall things out. You don't have to actually use your leader skills Skyfall buff on cooldown. You can use it when you please. And because of that, you have a different team building style. Yes, you could play with the same mindset as the Glass Cannon Sarasvati, but you don't have to. And it's not as efficient as a more tanky, stalling, patient gameplay. So when choosing subs, I would like to prioritize row enhances. You already have enough fire orb enhances from your leaders that's a bit overkill at this point, and you want to stack rows because rows is how you're going to get your big burst damage, and that's the best way to do it. Two-prong attacks are not as efficient. They are great for picking off smaller floors or when you have, say, like less convenient amount of fire orbs, but when you use actives, you're wanting to burst things down. TPAs are less efficient in terms of spacing and overall damage output because Krishna lacks them himself. And one other thing that I like to keep in mind is heavy two-prong subs are actually sometimes dangerous to run. They're dangerous in the sense that if you're doing a boss that has damage absorption mechanics, that two-prong card will hit harder than everyone else. So all your other cards will be dealing an appropriate amount of damage, but that TPA sub will be healing the boss. Not a good scenario because you may have anticipated a certain amount of damage to kill it, and this heal throws a kink in your plans. Of course, the two-prong can be beneficial if you're trying to pierce or penetrate through high defense bosses, but for myself, when I play Arena 3, I don't like running heavy TPA cards on a row-based team for that reason, because damage absorption bosses will wreak havoc on you, because that one card is hitting harder than the rest. Same thing can be said for Killer Awakenings, but that's, I guess, a completely different article as well. So, as a generalized statement, you want to try and run a tricolor board changer that obviously has synergy with some of your other actives to produce that 2/3 fireboard, 1/3 other board. So from the example I showcased earlier, that Leyland plus Yamato produced that 2/3 fireboard, and I could make 3 rows, giant burst damage. That is what you should try and aim for. How you achieve this 2/3 fireboard is either done through your subs, finding the right actives, or even using skill inheritance to make up for it. Like, the main reason why I prefer 2/3 fireboards is because, unlike, say, boards like Red Sonja or Mori Montanari, you're playing a gambling game because that board may not necessarily be as ideal. Like, the thing is, you pop Red Sonja, you might get, say, 11 fire orbs. You can't even form a row. Obviously, you can use Krishna's active to help compensate, but the point being is it's not reliable. Like, unlike Sarasvati, at least, who runs Blue Sonja very often, Krishna has about half the damage. So Sarasvati can get away with fewer matches because you'll hit 100 times. That probably will kill things. Krishna may not. So it is more of a gamble running a bicolor board changer, and that's why I caution its usage on Krishna team, just because your damage is lower. Now, the subs that are listed below are based on my opinion because he just came out, so I don't have much experience in it. I haven't used Krishna much myself either, but this is how I feel the subs will stack up against each other, and I'm trying to prioritize row enhances at all costs. What you use will be based on your own monster box, so take everything I say with a grain of salt. You may have a combo synergy that I don't, so you should be running that instead. So, first things first, run Sonata. Sonata is hands down the best sub you're going to get. We've seen the power of Akachi on dark teams and how the beautiful combo potential of Haku provides you with a 2/3 enhanced dark, 1/3 heart board. Everything dies, you're back to full health. Sonata has the same logic with Erd. You have a 2/3 enhanced fire, 1/3 heart board. Everything dies, basically, with a Sonata Erd board. Like, everything will die. Like, the board I showed you was about 10 million per card. This will probably get 15 million is my guesstimate, just because everything is enhanced. So, Sonata is probably the best card because he does have 4 rows, and that helps you achieve more row damage as well at the same time. Granted, he has less utility-based awakenings, but you have other cards for that. So if you have Sonata, I would run him hands down because making hard orbs is nice, making enhanced fire orbs is great. Next are these higher tier subs, and these are the subs that I consider stronger overall as a general rule speaking. Of course, you can mix and match as needed based on what your box and team synergy has, but these are the ones I feel are stronger. So Erd is probably the best natural board changer you have just because she makes hard orbs. Being able to make hard orbs and fire allows you to deal wonderful burst damage and heal. And it's that healing component that's important because there are a lot of times where you actually need to heal, but you need to deal damage at the same time, and you had a bad board to start. So Erd solves all those problems. Yes, she doesn't have row awakenings, but you have other subs for that. I wouldn't run 2 Erds, but I would definitely run 1 if you had the option. Yamato is the best soft bind clearer in my opinion because he A has a synergistic active, you make fire and you make enhanced heal. So with Yamato's active, you're basically healed to full health every single time. You can form that row of hearts to unbind yourself, and he has 3 rows as well as synergy with Leyland if you choose to run her. So just keep that in mind. Leyland is basically the second best natural board changer for your Krishna team. She has better awakenings than Erd, but she does not produce hard orbs, and that is why I feel it's not as strong. Furthermore, she doesn't combo with Sonata for the big burst damage, but she does combo with a lot of other orb changers, which I'll list down below later. Awoken Ares, or basically any other kind of Ares, is actually a very powerful sub because with his active, you're pretty much guaranteed at least 1 row plus full activation, maybe even 2, because he changes so many different orbs. And you're going to be flooded with fire. So he allows you to deal massive burst damage. Which Ares you choose to use, I guess, will be based on your box and if you're running other types of teams. But even though Awoken Ares has the Skyfall active and it quote-unquote competes with Krishna, it's good because you don't have to use Krishna on cooldown. You can use Ares to kind of fill that gap in between. And finally, we come to Awoken Cao Cao, and Awoken Cao Cao has orb changer that produces fire orbs from water and poison, and maybe jammers as well. But the point being is he can remove dangerous orbs and synergy with Erd as well. But he has that 1 turn of delay, and it's that unique utility that makes him quite valuable because why not? Like, who wouldn't want to have more utility? Because Krishna is a more durable team, you can use that delay to bypass various resolves or perseverance, or even just get an extra turn to set up your board. His awakenings are great. He's also bind immune, so you could even use him as a base to inherit bind clear. The next category are viable subs. They are still strong, but I feel that they are less powerful as standalone options. Yes, if you have synergy with other cards, you want to run them over other cards, but the point being is I feel that these have a bit less potency. So, for instance, Uriel is essentially an inferior Yamato in most regards because Uriel's awakenings are less ideal. Those auto-heal awakenings go to waste and they have no bind recovery. So it's just not as beneficial. But one thing to keep in mind is Uriel has great synergy with obviously Leyland as well, but it works with Saria and Gadius. So if you're running those types of inherits, you may want to run Uriel for that 2/3 burst damage. Just keep that in mind. The Red Valkyrie is another good option. She does have 2 rows, but she also has 2 prongs, so it's kind of a weird distribution of awakenings. But she has a huge chunk of recovery, and it's that high recovery that makes her very appealing because you're able to obviously heal up from attacks. And that's one thing Krishna teams may or may not struggle with is high enough recovery based on their giant health pool. So her active can easily be upgraded with someone, say even Antares or any other board changer or orb changer you like because it's such a short 5-turn cooldown. So just keep that in mind. Reincarnated Minerva will be very powerful when she's released, mostly because she gets the 1,000 weighted stats. She's also bind immune and has a quick 5-turn cooldown. So the same logic applies with the Red Valkyrie in that you can inherit something over top of it. She has less board change synergy compared to Femme, unless you're using someone like Gadius or Haku, but you can obviously inherit something on top of it. She can inherit a bind clear and then have an orb changer afterwards. Good option, pretty girl, why not use her? Antares is another powerful option like Femme, but their awakenings are not necessarily as good because there's no rows, and the main benefit is those enhanced heal orbs. The Godkiller could get you killed in certain absorption bosses, so depending on the dungeon, you may or may not want to run them just because of the Godkiller awakening. But regardless, they have a powerful active, they can remove jammers and poisons, so they are a great option for helping tidy up boards and saving board changers. Chiyomi is another quick 5-turn board or orb changer who has synergy with Saria and Leyland because she converts light to fire. And her Balance and Devil Killer awakenings are kind of unusual, but they may have value in certain dungeons. Just be aware of absorption bosses. Gadius is actually a reasonable sub. He'd be a good sub if his active was better, because Gadius's active makes 4 elements, so you're very unlikely to have 3 or 9 fire orbs, and you're still unlikely to even get 6 heart orbs. So it's a gamble using Gadius's active unless you have something like Uriel to combo with it. Otherwise, you may not have enough of the orbs you require to either recover binds or to deal damage. Granted, Gadius can inherit another board change on top of him, but he has a long base cooldown, so it's a bit harder to work around. Belial could be a strong sub if max skilled. It has synergy of Leyland with the wood to fire orb changer, and the counterattack has niche uses, mostly in that you are able to, say, bypass certain resolve bosses such as Zeus Hera, but it's a little niche. He's a little awkward overall. Like, there's nothing too outstanding about him, and he's a lot of investment to max skill. Napoleon is a Fire Gala exclusive, and they generate 5 random fire orbs at random in Japan. We'll get that soon. And they have a 35% damage reduction for 3 turns. So it's an interesting active because you get 2 different components. The 5 fire orbs is reasonably impactful enough. You should be able to get a modest amount of fire orbs in total to deal damage. The shielding is a little unusual, but the shielding can definitely help you mitigate large anticipated hits or protect yourself against gravity-based attacks. So it's not a terrible option, and as Dragon Killer may have situational uses, so it's a reasonable card to run. The only downside is there's no rows, and it's just more orb enhances, which you don't actually need. Thuban, if I'm saying that name correctly, is one of the Cyber Dragons. They generate a row of fire orbs at the top. They also bind immune, and they have the Recover Bind Awakening. So it's an unusual set of awakenings for him, but it's an option for like a soft bind clearer that can't make hard orbs, but it's still an option nevertheless because he's bind immune. Furthermore, that row of fire orbs at the top does actually help you make combos because most people will hoard their orbs at the bottom of the board, and then you will actually make the row of top and then make your combos at the bottom, big burst damage there. The haste is helpful here and there. Just be aware of his cooldown being 8 turns. So still an option, but it's there at least. Layla is basically a female version of Thuban that has a worse active because it spawns orbs at the bottom. So like I said, if you're hoarding orbs at the bottom, this is counterintuitive, counterproductive, so it's not a good thing to do. Her Dragon and Attacker Killer Awakenings have situational uses, just be aware of absorption bosses, so on and so forth. But with a 5-turn base cooldown, you can easily inherit something on top of her. Macedo is similar to Ares, basically in the sense that you convert, well, dark and hearts to fire, so you flood the board. It's just their awakenings are a bit more lackluster by comparison. Red Sonja can even be run still. Red Sonja is probably a very common monster that a lot of people have, but the only downside is compared to, say, Blue Sonja on being used on Sarasvati teams, Red Sonja has inferior awakenings and stats. Her bind recovery has uses as a very soft bind clearer, but it's still something to consider. However, bicolor board changers are less proficient on Krishna teams just because they have a lower multiplier, and Sarasvati can usually get away with just 9 water orbs to deal 100 times, whereas Krishna won't. Awoken Freyr is a damage enhancing option, but you should need a damage enhance if you have a 2/3 board changer like I displayed. 60 million damage is more than enough to kill most things in the game, so you really don't need to run Awoken Freyr in most scenarios. Reincarnate Hino will have 1,000 weighted stats, but his triple 2-prong is a little dangerous, especially if there's absorption bosses. Yes, it helps on smaller foils where you can pick things off with TPA, but just keep those things in mind. His active is not that good value because you're essentially generating fire orbs and losing hard orbs for a 7-turn cooldown, as the dark orbs usually don't have much value, and the defense break is not used very often in all honesty. Set is another damage-enhancing option, but he has worse awakenings than Freyr, but he makes fire orbs from hearts, so some value there. The triple 2-prong can be risky, but it can be beneficial, so on and so forth. Kiriko had a lot of popularity on the Fire Xiangmei team, but that was because they had no other choice, and their awakenings are a bit more lackluster, and she's pretty much better just as an inherit, because Krishna can be pickier of their subs, and you can run something stronger. Next is Dino Rider, and Dino Rider has actually received a lot of buffs, which people probably don't even realize, but he actually can remove jammers and poison orbs, as well as generating fire orbs. And it's not a terrible option. You do lose out on hearts, but removing those hazardous orbs can be advantageous. And the dual two-prong, like, just be aware of it. It does have one row, so it's not a terrible option. Like, you probably have a Dino Rider lying around, and it might be useful because it's easy to skill up now. So these are situational subs, and these are subs who I wouldn't run on a normal basis. I would run them if you don't have other options or you need specific amount of utility that they bring. Because Red Riding Hood is a hard orb generator and a hard bind clearer. Most dungeons you can possibly get away with a soft bind clear, especially in co-op, but Red Riding Hood is a great option for those who need that hard bind clear, and she's your best option because she has 3 fire rows. As well as being able to make hard orbs can be advantageous because you can break them with someone else, so it kind of evens out a little bit more, especially compared to Ame no Uzume, who is not a very good hard bind clear. The 2 times recovery is kind of pointless because you have enough already, and it's mostly there to bait out, say, status voids, but she doesn't offer much else aside from that. She's prettier than Red Riding Hood, but I'd rather run something more powerful than pretty. Raziel is, I guess, a medium firm bind clear because she has the bind immunity and the recover bind, and she does generate hard orbs, so there is some synergy there, but she's more popular just because of Rendezvous teams and how the rainbow system needs the fire-water coverage, and has less value on Krishna because the triple 2 prongs don't provide rows, so it's not as good overall. Guan Yu is a bit more offensive bind clear because he can convert hearts and poisons into fire, and he has a 3-turn bind clear, so his active is actually reasonable. Just the main problem is his actives are not that offensive, and if you have more offensive awakenings, you may want to run those guys instead of Guan Yu, just because you do lose hard orbs, and I don't like losing hard orbs as a general rule. Tsubaki is an awkward fire sub at this point. With the dual Dragon Killer Awakenings might have more value, but right now he's not good enough to be used on Krishna because the enhanced fire orbs, you don't need more, and generating 3 fire orbs is a low impact active. You're not providing enough firepower for your team because you could pop Tsubaki and you don't have enough fire orbs to even activate fully, so you didn't solve any problems with his active. So I would not run Tsubaki unless you have it fully invested and you have nothing else. The same can be said for Dantalion, except Dantalion at least has a bit stronger active because you generate hard orbs, but the same 3 fire orb generation is not impactful enough. The Red Puppeteer is powerful if you're fighting water bosses because you switch their attributes so you're dealing effectively 4 times damage, but it's niche at best, the awakenings are lackluster, and it's a 250,000 monster point investment, so unless you had one already and you really need that water, the change from water to wood, I wouldn't run her. And finally, Scarlet. I consider Scarlet more of a filler sub than anything else. Yes, they make 4 instead of 3 orbs at random, so it might have a bit more value, but again, it's still a low impact active. But she is farmable. She's a great placeholder until you get something stronger or more developed. So I would not recommend using Krishna as a sub because you don't need more fire enhances, and the active doesn't help you out in most cases, so he's just a base for skill inheritance, but you could probably find a better base elsewhere. So, here are the sample teams, and basically because Krishna is so flexible, you can obviously run what is best from your monster box, but I would try and bring a balance of utility, orb changers, and bind clearing if needed, whether it be soft or hard. And you have to also keep in mind the damage requirements of the dungeon, and try your very best to get a 2/3 fire board, because that's how you deal big burst damage. So, you are able to further customize your actives with skill inheritance, which I'll discuss a bit more further down below, but this is what I would consider a relatively core team for Krishna if you have the subs available. I like Sanada, Erd, and Yamato in kind of that descending order, because Sanada is the best, like I mentioned beforehand. Erd is the best natural board changer. Yes, there's no rows, but this team already provides enough rows to make up for it. And then your last spot is this Flex. And that Flex sub is based on what you have at your disposal. If you have another Sanada, I would run the other Sanada in all honesty. But the idea is you have that flexibility, because Yamato does provide that soft bind clear. You have lots of hard orb generation, you have lots of fire orb generation, you have enhancement. You have everything you need on your Krishna team right here. So this would be, I would consider, kind of the quote-unquote cookie-cutter build for Krishna. However, obviously not everyone has those subs, and you can mix and match based on what you have. So this team here, you use the Latent Uriel for the big burst damage, you have Ares for flooding the board, and your Scarlet is your filler in case you get something better in the meantime. This team here has the 2/3 board synergy with Erd and Fem. Yes, you're using Red Sonya, which is not as ideal, but it's there because you may not have other options. And this Awoken Sao does also have synergy with your Erd. This Fem could inherit something else, like say a Saria board changer or something else that's going to help you out lots. So barring all that, like you can't make all these teams, like obviously you feel like you're struggling, take a look at this little diagram here of board change synergy. Like these are board changes you can run either as inherits or subs, and these are the cards they combo with. They probably combo with more, but these are just kind of the common ones I thought of off the top of my head. So just keep this in mind. Like if you don't have good natural board changers and you have a Haku, use Haku, and then you're running like say Hino Kagetsugu. You have that water to fire conversion, and that's your 2/3 board. So be creative. Use this diagram. It will help you out lots. So this next section here, I want to discuss how you should be using Krishna's active skill. Now, when you're playing Saraswati, you pretty much always use your active on cooldown because you're basically go, go, go. Krishna, on the other hand, can stall, go, stall, go. Like, he can choose what he wants to do based on the situation. And that means you don't have to use the active on cooldown, because if you're stalling, you really don't want those fire orbs falling down because they're going to match and trigger and you're going to deal damage. So, when you're using Krishna's active, just keep in mind when you want to be dealing damage for the next 3 turns effectively. Like, that's what you're kind of thinking. For the next 3 turns, I'm going to be kind of go, go, going. But the thing is, another benefit of not using the active on cooldown is to save it to correct, say, bad board changes, because you do get 2 fire orbs. So let's say my Leyland plus Yamato board change I made beforehand would have yielded 13 light orbs. 13 light orbs does not generate 2 rows. Or it generates 2 rows, but if I use Krishna's active, I'd have 11 light orbs, and then I actually can make my 3 rows and deal big burst damage. So that's a way you can keep in mind, like how you can correct Krishna's active. Furthermore, you can even inherit something on top of Krishna because you're not using the active all the time, you're able to stall. So by having something more advantageous or more impactful inherited, it will make a bigger difference going through a longer dungeon. So, as I alluded to beforehand, Krishna can benefit from skill inheritance. Obviously, your subs can as well, but that's too open to discuss individually. But I want to look at Krishna in, only for skill inheritance. And what you choose to use is obviously based on your situation, your box, or what you need to bring for your team. But I want to just throw this out there right now. Awoken Ares is a giant upgrade to the active. You get the Skyfall mechanic, which you like. You also get a massive flooding of fire orbs. So that is one of the best actives. In addition, you can run a dupe Krishna as an inheritance just to completely protect yourself against skill delays. Just something to keep in mind. Now, what you choose to use will be based on your situation, and for damage enhance, you generally don't need it, because if you have a 2/3 fireboard, that's more than enough. However, Set at least generates orbs, so it kind of helps offset a dead active, and Silk is usually overkill if your team has lots of orb enhances. Just keep those 2 in mind depending on what you need, but I really wouldn't run a damage enhance inherit in most scenarios. True Damage Poison's there for getting rid of pre-draws, but you probably could burst pre-draws down in all honesty. Board changers is probably the most important one, and what you pick is based on your situation and what is going to help your team out the most, so refer to this chart here. Damage mitigation, you really don't need that to be honest, but it's worth mentioning, like a few damage mitigation options. But most practical would probably be the 100% damage voids, because that allows you to survive weird mechanics. Delays are useful if you don't have, say, Awoken Sao as a sub, and orb changers are great because they have more impact than Krishna's active, generally speaking. So if I've missed any crucial inherit, just please let me know and I'll add it and edit things accordingly. If you want to read more about skill inheritance, check out my advanced guide here, which is in the article, which you can find in the YouTube description down below. So, Latent Awakening setups. Now, Krishna does not excel particularly at any stat. Like, I'm just going to go back up here, and if you look here, his stats are not particularly amazing. Like, he's not like it's well-rounded stats, let's put it that way, because of that balance typing. So, the health, recovery, and attack latents have less value on him, so I'd recommend actually just giving him Rainbow Resist as the default choice. Time Extend if you're really struggling to form enough combos, but Rainbow Resist in most cases. For your Subs, however, if any of them excel at, say, health or recovery, I would strongly suggest putting those latents on them. Because of Krishna's active or leader skill provides double the benefit, you're going to be gaining a lot more health and recovery from those cards, and they will largely eclipse the rainbow resist in most scenarios. So that's my recommendations for latent setups. Obviously, you can do what you want. Like, you might just want more attack, which I think is unnecessary, but some people like having those attack latents. As for solo badge recommendations, I strongly suggest you use the recovery badge, even if you have the 15% health one unlocked, because in most cases you have enough health to survive any attack. Whereas recovery, you always can get more because you can easily heal up from, say, 20,000 hits by making enough combos, and just your base recovery is so high. So I would use the recovery badge because it provides 25% boost. The only time I would make an exception to this rule is if you struggle with your health and you need that bit of health to survive a certain hit. Maybe there's a 50,000 hit that you need to survive and you are not able to do that just yet because your team's not fully maxed out. That health badge may allow you to do that, especially if it's the 15% health badge. But in most cases, I would recommend the recovery badge. So, in summation, this was a long article. This is like 4,000 words. But Krishna is essentially an incredible leader, and they're able to keep abreast with the Heart Cross meta, and they are the strongest monocolored tank team in existence. You have great damage control in the sense that you know when you're going to burst because you form rows and multiple fire combos. You can stall with ease, and you can tackle content like Arena 3. Like, I'll post an Arena 3 clear when I actually get around to it. So look forward to that. Like, Krishna is pretty amazing, and I really hope Gung-Ho follows this kind of pattern of making older leaders that were good viable again, that can compete against Heart Cross meta, because it's good to have variety in terms of leaders that you actually choose and bring into a dungeon. So let me know what you think about your Krishna, or like, what do you think about Krishna overall? What kind of subs and teams you plan to use in the comments below. Have a mantastic day, and happy puzzling!